We are going to call this meeting to order. Fiscal year 23-24 general budget workshop. The idea was to make sure we got all the elected together to kind of fill you in on where we are and how we got where we are and what we do and don't know about where we are. And with a little bit of history I'm learning from the prosecutor. So if you can pull up my PowerPoint, mine aren't going to be quite as colored. Our goal would be to be in the green.
Oh, very good.
Is that it really wasn't that green on my computer, but so I'm just going to give you a brief rundown of where but try and give you an idea of what has happened up in the last few days and weeks. If you their first one, so I don't know if it was normal, but we met with a lot of you elected. I think we met with everybody in the elected. We met with Tammy. We did our thing, and we came up with a proposed budget that we could get in time to get advertised. That budget, when you look at it, is about 1.2 million over last year, and that's things like inflation, expanding. I came up with a fancy term for it, but bottom line, more people breaking rules and needing more policemen, more prosecutors, expanding burden of duties, and the $2 million increase. We were missing some information that we felt was necessary. Like we weren't even sure how that would impact the slide. That's when things started to go the other direction. And I can remember going into Tammy's office with our meeting, thinking there that day, and we'll let her talk here in a little bit about how that came up with. But she and Peggy had worked out the L2 and done some really did need to cut not the 1.2, which would have brought us back to last year's level, but an entire 3.2 to get us to a budget that would be a passing, that we could pass, that would be a legal budget. That's where up at the top. Okay, so if that's correct, if those numbers are correct, how do we cut 3.2? That's like the last 4 or 5 years of increases and things. How list all the things you're required to do by law. Suddenly go from being fine to being 3.2. Is there just a math error? The board has been working on it, asking questions. We voted the other day to set aside some of the LETCF money to even try and get an outside auditor or somebody to help us dig in. So so this is how could we start off needing to find not only no increases, but another $2 million. And if you go to the next slide, so there's our options. I'll start with the bottom one because I like that one. or something. I don't know that that's likely, but it's one option that we dig and we find out that the numbers were more correct in the beginning, that we're not 3 million off, and we continue on with our budget process. But the other possibility that we all need to be planning for elected is that we do need to cut 3.2 million out of the budget. And I think I'm hearing the board saying, and we're not really willing to do that until we know for sure that's what needs done, because it's going to be catastrophic. And we don't want I think we have ended up. So if we are in fact in trouble, the board, I think, still feels we need to clarify it and fix it before we start throwing solutions at it like grant money and things. Because right now, to be very frank, it's somebody else's problem. Somebody, this was created, accident, whatever. It was built up until now. If we don't fix it, if we just patch it up with grants and things, how many million would we be short next year? And then, we might push the catastrophe off, but we've got to figure out how we were that far off, and if we are that far off, and what we have to do. If we can get to the answers, which is why we've asked for some outside support for Tammy for that, and for the board to understand this, because none of us are accountants, speaking for the board. There are things the board can do to help. So now the word's going to be out after this meeting that the county may be up to 3 million or more in the hole. The word's going to be out that people are going to jump to conclusions. What does that mean for my job, and all those things that come with that? We've put that off as long as we can, but the solutions I've heard bounced around between the clerk, myself, the other commissioners, some of the other elected. We may be able to use some of the LETCF money in some ways, like paying things that would have been otherwise be capital expenses. Did I say that correctly? Capital expenses. We might be able to use some LETCF. I'm not willing to do it until we know where the problem is, to make sure we're not just passing the problem off. But that would be one way we could alleviate some of this immediate crisis. We've talked about, I believe the clerk checked, and I asked the state as well, that if we did sell the Maverick property, could we direct that fund into current expense? It seems to be the answer is yes on that. So there's some possibilities there that could cushion the blow. But we still got two big things in red on that slide there. We have to clarify how we got this way so we don't end up worse next year. And then it is all of our faults, because we've all served a year, and it's all of our fault we didn't fix it. And we get to that red button down there at the bottom. Let's say we decide we really but then it comes to you elected. How do we set this county back 3 or 4 years through no fault of your own, but for whether it was overspending or overcommitment or whatever we find the problem is, when we figure out where the money is gone. And I don't believe that the money is, I'm not suggesting at any point here that I think the money is stolen. I think the money is spent. I think that would be a more accurate thought, but it's still going to come down to the elected. You don't want the county commissioners to just say, well, we're just going to take 22.5% off of everybody's budget randomly and we'll select. So the elected are going to have to be involved, and you're going to have to figure out, how do you do what you do? How do you do what you're supposed to be doing legally with resources from 3 or 4 years ago instead of from where we wanted to be? So you can see why I put that one last, and hopefully you can understand why we've delayed answering this, because there's been a lot of digging going on everybody's part to figure out, are we really in that kind of trouble? And I still don't have enough answers in my heart that I can say, yes, we are. But we're here today to share information. We have until, is it the 5th of September, to come up with a budget right?
If we have to approve the budget, then that means I have to back it up so that I can actually make all the adjustments in the budget so that we have a budget. And that was Tuesday, the 29th. That's why I can't say on the 20th.
Thank you.
3 days.
Next Tuesday.
Correct.
That's next Tuesday.
One of the problems that I see is we're off about $1.9 million from last year's receipts to this year's. And we don't have an answer for it. And in accounting, in auditing, I've been through 30 years of audits, and you have to prove with documentation why. And I haven't got any proof on why it's not, we're the $1.9 million. Why are we short? I have no accounting proof whatsoever. And so I cannot make that decision. I don't know what we're gonna do.
I don't know.
I've got questions with, I'm gonna reach out to the Idaho State Controller today to see what we can do. I'm concerned. We shouldn't push this on our taxpayers. Sure, we can raise the budget by 3%, but is that gonna get us next year? Our taxpayers are out there saying, uncle, we got a lot of older folks out. I don't see where it's at. I don't have any documentation showing me that it was reduced. I mean, why was it reduced? It's just like it never was here.
And how much was that you're saying?
1.9. It's just
Are you
between
talking about revenue?
revenue. It's just between last year's
Published budget.
published budget from this year's budget. And so that throws us off.
Yeah, if you look at all the L2s since 2019 and look at revenue, all of a sudden in the current budget we're working in, the revenue went up like almost $2 million projected, but I don't think it's there.
Didn't come in.
Yep.
Cause over the last 4 or 5 years, the revenue's been about the same, going up slowly.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we have this crazy 8-point-something million projected revenue, 8.5 million. And that's not there. Part of it is in the justice fund that I see. There's about $1 million in there or so projected revenue or more.
1.4.
Yeah. That just says miscellaneous revenue.
Which 900 of that was transferred from current expense. Expense. Public expense came from indigent. Indigent fund went away. I said that 100 times. That was our biggest cash cow that we ever had. That's where we put money. It's defunded. It was defunded in March of 22.
How much would that be?
I think it was 900,000 when they quit.
Yeah.
And now we have about, well, I've got 30,000 in my budget this year for it.
And
And it's not levied.
last year, what was in the budget for it?
I don't know. I'd have to look at indigent.
So is that shortfall of either 1.2 or 3.2? That includes taking our 3%?
Yes. So what confused me is it looked like last year the commissioners raised the budget about $1 million. So in my mind, as we were working through and trying to figure out COLA and everything, we're thinking, okay, so if we raise the budget, we probably within our 3%, we might be able to raise it $1 million. But what Tammy and Peggy came up with is that county, we have to cut 3.2 million and still raise taxes 3% is what I believe I understood from them. And that was the big shocker for Tammy and I sat and stared at each other and went,
Anytime you raise your budget over 3% in any one of the funds, you're going to go over above that 3% threshold unless some other budget is under. That's fact.
Yeah.
It's plain and clear. We have, in the last 3 years, we have gone up in 3 different departments higher than other departments. And over 3%. Last year, we did a 7 or 8% increase across the board for everybody. That's over 3%, isn't it? That's where.
I'm kind of confused as to when we were initially doing our budgeting, everything seemed to be okay. And then it went from everything being okay to $3.2 million. So how are you made aware of that? Like, how did that even transpire?
Well, the revenue. There's notice of public hearing, and that's kind of how,
I gave everybody revenue sheets in May.
yeah, but it wasn't, I mean, not up to date. I mean, not
They
like
were
this,
as of
I
May.
know, but not currently.
Half a year.
Because I asked you for him last or 2 weeks ago about getting the revenue.
Revenue and expense.
Yeah, I didn't know we'd have a shortfall until the budget, until we got down to the wire, and
So essentially, we just don't know whether this has been an accumulatory.
we have no
That,
idea
or-
where it,
I think we're working in a budget that isn't funded correctly right now. Because the numbers are based off of revenues that don't exist.
Yep.
And
Millions
you
of
showed
dollars.
me one in your budget the other day.
Yeah, if you just. Here this year, it's 1.3. And without that error, I don't think the budget we're in would be funded right, wouldn't even be funded correctly.
So you think the 2 point was an error from last year?
Yeah, I just don't think it was.
Because that's not, you never.
Broken down it is,
Justice.
okay.
the justice fund, but if you look overall as a county, the revenue
Mhm.
that was projected, it's not even close to what we've ever gotten, so.
Mhm.
So who projected that last year?
I did. And the way I projected it was I worked with other clerks. I worked with the State Tax Commission. I worked with IEC to figure out how do we break it apart? Because you're taking 3 that were in the current expense and separating out their income from current expense at a percentage. Because they're shared accounts. And there's like 7 or 8 of them that are shared. There's sales tax revenue sharing, liquor apportionment, payment in lieu of taxes, property tax replacement, and interest income. Those had to be split. So we took the amount of expenses that the Justice Department 3 funds had, plus public defense, and how much the current expense had, and we came up with a figure of 53 point something for current expense, 47 point something for justice fund. So when any of those revenue sources come in, they're split. The other thing that we did is we took the current reserved cash balance that we had and we split it by the same figure. And then we allocated money into the justice fund as revenue, and that was a transfer of miscellaneous revenues. And left part of it in current expense. That's the only way you could do it, because you have to start with something. So they started with something there, and then we came up with an average of what we projected would be additional moves that we could move out of current expense to help with the justice fund. We didn't do those right away. We waited. I moved $900,000 a month ago, or better, to offset where they were at. And it has been shared revenue and expense with every elected official and department head every single month on the reports that we give them. It's in there every single month. It shows a negative cash balance every single month for the justice fund after, I don't know what month it was, but for several months. And not one question came from anybody. And there were other departments that were the same thing. So, I mean, if people aren't looking at those, I mean, I like for you.
No, I'm
Giving
just
that
asking you. This
question.
just sent out. I asked you for the revenue. I got the email asking you for it and I never got the revenue. So we just
I
went
sent
off.
it
of
to you.
work.
I came in on a Saturday and sent the whole thing to you.
I didn't get the revenue. I got just the budget.
Both of them.
Well,
Okay.
we've got problems, so we need to
Well,
work on this
let's,
forward.
we do need to understand what happened so that we can fix it or not repeat it.
Mhm.
But it is gonna have to be a team solution because as you saw in my last slide, it's gonna come down to, if we're really missing that money, we're all gonna have to figure out how we're gonna. I mean, you don't want the county commissioner randomly deciding you don't need that extra desk chair. Your chairs aren't expensive compared to hers anyway, by the way, just I've checked. So we've got to come up with a solution. Peggy, you were here and you've been volunteering and helping. What's your perspective on this? Do you feel like sharing?
Well, I think since I had left, there has not been in the clerk's office, when Tammy came in, she didn't have the experience that I got when I was the clerk. Because my whole office retired. And I think that compounded the problem. Because on the budgeting process, when Tammy was training just before, she broke her foot. Of course, I forgot about that, that she had broke her foot. And I think in the past that the process didn't get around because it's not all on the clerk's shoulders to do this.
Right.
The process has always been, you get 3%. And when I was the clerk, I took the 3% and divided how much in current expense, because this isn't the first time we've been broke, by the way. Or trying to break levies. This isn't the first time. But what's happened that I always took the 3% and took the percentage of each office. Okay, this is how much you get out of that first 3%. That way you kind of figured like Ben's office might be a little higher because it's prosecutor versus the clerk's office. But that's how I kind of began to start dividing. And in the process, the clerk always ended up having to back into your wish list. The best thing to do is first see if you can cover what you made the first year, what you're on. So on your department heads, you should go down right with the budget you worked with. If you didn't spend the item, put it back into the coffer, so to speak. And then on your wish list, put to the side with letters and stuff, and then the figures. That way you can first see if you can fund what was in the past, because by that time the clerk is adjusting her revenues, and Tammy's got hit with apparently with revenue sharing and sales tax, it's down. So that way at least you can justify that you can first get to that point and then add. But you got to remember, when you guys are giving to one office, you're discounting. That step and grade system was placed there for a reason. And that's the killer. That's where it looked like to me where all the cash went was in wages. And that is.
Then we didn't lose 2 million in a year.
No,
I think it's
this
been
has
coming
happened-
up in.
This has been where they kicked the can down the road. And that's what I see, that the can was kicked down the road. And this was going to hit eventually. No, I don't think it was 1 year. I think it's been a combination.
And I do think it's important for each department on those reports you do receive monthly. Because you can catch things maybe that someone else isn't seeing, but we need to watch those every month and try to stay on track of where we're at. That's why they give them to us in case errors do happen, either on our side or their side. And that's how we catch them before they come major problems.
The part of it that made that up was the Silver Mountain settlements that we had. we had to reduce the taxes for 18, 19, 20. And we did that 2 years ago, and this year we had to pay back, the 2017 taxes. And that's all departments, so we're waiting on revenue to come in $125,000 from the districts that we haven't received yet. We will get it, but it's gonna be less. We're gonna have lower than expected revenues in sales tax, revenue sharing, and liquor disbursements. We got about 14% the first quarter, and it's down to 4%. That's significant. That's a lot of our money. We also, we funded the indigent fund, which that's a lot of money. We are not getting in as many payments on catastrophic medical that we were getting before. We're down pretty much to the people that don't have the money to pay, and you wait till they pass on or sell their property.
You
before
have
we
an
get
extra
that
one of
money.
those?
One of these, yes. And, we also have increased dramatically our medical repayments that we have to make, on behalf of the jail and on behalf of medical exams that are ordered by the court. We have no choice in those. They have been skyrocketing. Insurance has gone up a lot. Next year, we're gonna have an even further increase, about 32% over what we're paying today in workers' comp because of the accident ratio that we have and the payouts that we have. And those aren't even reflected in the budget yet. I just found out about those.
How much did you say that was in dollars? Do you remember?
72,000.
72,000 in additional expenses.
Yes, and that's the estimate now. Next year will be even more because we're going past 3 years. And we have one good year, one pretty good year, and then one really bad year. And this next year is going to be even worse than that year by a lot. So that's gonna affect next year as well. The move, and then the public defense, that keeps going up every year. Our revenue coming in on that is currently for this year, I just adjusted it in $396,000. And that will be coming in for this next 2024. And our expenses, as you can see, in that fund, are around 613,000.
I mean,
So it's money we don't have coming in. It's levied in the justice fund, shared with the sheriff and the jail and safety building.
state gonna take over the public defense.
They are supposed to take it over next year. This is the last funding that we'll get. And we just got that notification this morning.
To that point, even the takeover of the public defense isn't even gonna solve all of the cost of public defense. There's still some unanswered questions, at least last time I checked, for legal services that the county is required to provide to indigents. Most notable of which, a good example would be child protective
Yep.
cases.
They're
That
not
was
public
left out.
defenders, really.
And so anytime there's one of those, there's usually on average 3 separate defense attorneys in most of those cases that the county has to pay out of pocket for. And even with the takeover of public defense, the legislation as it's drafted right now isn't going to assume that responsibility at the state level. So
So we have no way to levy for it because that goes away. But unless it stays in the sheriff's the justice fund, and we use that money to levy. But as you know, I mean, if we did a little exercise yesterday with the sheriff's office and see just how far over their levy are, because they're the only one that is red on the levy sheet, but that is totally irrelevant. As I try to explain, that just means that they are over their 0.002 cap on where they can ever levy. Everybody has a cap on the L2. Current expense is 0.002. And we are like at 0.00017. So we have quite a bit of growth in there. If I cut $200,000 out of their expenses today, or out of $200,000 in revenue, they would meet their levy rate. But we would have only gone down $200,000 out of 3.1. So it's not one fund's problem. And if they were to only cut 200,000 next year, when they get their 3%, they're gonna get 3% on their levy. And that's that. No more. There will be no money to cover anything else. And that won't cover the wages. So, I mean, benefits alone are not. Where does the revenue go? It goes to fund all of those increases.
So in your mind, is it fair to say that our cash has been being used up over the last few years?
Yes, absolutely.
So we're running out of cash.
Yes, and that's what funds the cash balance that comes. And as I explained the other day, you take your budget that you're gonna have this year, what your anticipated revenues are going to be, and your expenses to get that budget figure. You take how much cash you have above that available. And then you take your current budget, how much have you spent, how much do you have left to spend? We always assume we spend every bit of our budget because we budget at a point where we're supposed to spend every bit of our budget or don't budget for it. And so if I take those two away, that's how you get with the minus 413,000 in current expense. That's how you get to those figures. And then we adjust it by anticipating.
So we've nailed it down to where that the reason why it's low is because it was overestimated, right? For the last so many years. Is that why it's low? I mean, have we figured out
Overestimated cash?
overestimated our revenues? I mean, we need to make sure that that's exactly what it is. You know, we need to, you should be able to go back and make sure that, okay, that's what it. Just say, okay, it's fine. We have to go back and look at it to see if it was overestimated. We got to make sure we go all the way back. We got to count for every penny.
We do every year through our audit.
But that doesn't fix our shortfall. We got to know where it went. How did that happen? We've got to figure it out.
I just told you where it went. I don't
No,
know.
but you can't tell us. We got to
Can you
prove
help
it.
me tell how, I don't know how else to say where it went, Joe.
And part of this
I mean-
is the commissioners trying to understand.
We're trying to understand it, but we have to have, here's a,
Well, if you take
Here's
the
a sheet
revenue
that I have.
year, now the revenue sheet, there, you will see where the revenues went. And then you can estimate what came in, what didn't. So what didn't come in, then you can assume that you used the cash for that.
The other thing you have
Does that
to-
make sense?
here's a 5-year, this is a sheet that I printed off. And it's a 5-year revenue summary.
I have it.
And so with that, I mean, is that how you figure? You look at all those revenue summaries? Is that how you figure what the average revenue and then you put it on the budget?
You're taking a total amount of revenue from everything. You gotta realize that a lot of those funds are restricted. They can't be moved around.
I
They
know.
can't be used for something else,
Yeah,
but they're
like the
included
roads.
in that pile of revenue, right? So a lot of that is road department, solid waste. Those are, you can't do anything with that.
There, right?
Yes.
So,
Roads doesn't levy,
yeah, I know.
but, and several others don't levy even.
Well, if you take roads out of the revenue
Mm-hmm.
projected from 21 to 22, it's like $2.6 million increase in projected revenue from 21 to 22.
Oh.
Which just isn't even possible
For the justice or for the
overall.
For the overall.
Mhm.
Overall revenue, if you take roads out of the equation, because their revenue fluctuates a lot,
Mhm.
but
So and you're suggesting we have overestimated revenue?
by quite a bit, and that's why we're working in a budget that isn't funded properly. And then I don't know if you just look at everything, it doesn't,
Mhm.
nothing can add up to that, and there's just no way there could be that much more revenue.
So I take the revenue estimates come from every elected official and they say how much they're gonna bring on every one of their revenue items. The only ones that aren't in there is what we get out of the levies. There's no other revenue put in there. So I don't know how it can be overestimated. Cause you guys tell me where it's gonna come from.
Right.
So that would have come from the former sheriff.
Well, we only ever submit about
300, yeah, 300,
400
400
to 500,000 revenue from the sheriff's office.
it's like
That's-
355 for sheriff and then another 100.
But I think you showed me the other day where we had 1 million and something on that.
That's revenues that we don't put into that's,
So where did that come from? That's the question.
That was the move. When we moved the money out of current expense to fund the justice fund.
Oh.
You have to add current expense and, justice fund together to get what it was a year ago.
Okay.
Cause it's brand new this year. So we anticipated then that we would have adjustments. The state tax commission told me we would have adjustments. There's no way to like perfectly figure out exactly who's gonna get how much.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
they're
Tammy, what,
already now-
you said it was, moved from the justice fund and from,
Well, we cut to the justice fund and did away with current expense this year. So it's our first full year.
When you say current expense, is that the shared?
that add up. The current
And
expense,
you have to take away public defense.
yeah, the current expense revenue was only ever projected around $3 million all the prior years. And then all of a sudden you have this year where if you have the current expense projected revenue in the sheriff's office or in the justice fund, it's well over 5 million projected. But the current expense was never ever projected over 3 million the years prior, hardly, a little over.
Part of that we took from, admin costs from the budget set out a lot of cash. And we moved it into revenue, into current expense to help fund that.
And how we ever arrived at admin costs, so you guys know. Prior, you had commissioner salaries came out of 3 different areas, your clerk's office comes out of 3 different areas. Then you have the space of the buildings and we went with rent. And it costs the clerk for all your guys' supplies when you're sending out checks. Plus it's costing Carrie's time for redeeming all these checks. So your current expense in accounting is less than. But you were moved, so. But I'm sure you spend a lot of time giving legal advice too. But your current expense in accounting is your overhead, basically. Because your clerk office, your treasurer's office, they're not gonna have funds to, or income really to fund their budgets. They're not able to go out and, I mean, the little bit of recording, you know, might fund one, maybe one clerk, maybe. You want to spend, yeah?
No.
Well, we have two challenges for the commission. We've got to have a clear understanding of what went wrong and how to fix it so we can stop this before it multiplies next year. And the second problem is if these numbers are right, we have to not only eliminate the 1.2 million in increases we were considering, but we got to find another 2 in the budget in the next few days. And that's one reason Tammy and I talked a week or so ago about getting the elected involved, is because it's going to probably fall to you to help with that. You needed to understand where the problem came from. I still don't have a firm grasp of how we got here completely. I understand the idea that we've been using up cash. I don't understand how we would catch that in the future to make sure that's not happening, but what the commission has done is we've set aside a little bit of money to try to bring in somebody to help us understand a little better, dig a little deeper, put more man hours on it but the odds of getting anything done meaningful between now and budget is scary. And hopefully you can all understand, as commissioners, some of us are sitting here thinking, how do I vote to approve a budget where I don't even understand how I got in the hole before I even got here? And my ultimate concern. How do we keep the county functioning? My thinking has shifted over the year. I don't think we're in a building full of overpaid people. I had even in my mind had come to wrestle with it. We probably were going to need to increase taxes because the burden just on law enforcement to try to keep up with the problem that you didn't create. The problem, the courts, the prosecutor, the defense, all the things Tammy has named. But now we're at a point where we may be looking at you all having to cut hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the size of your department. And I'm not sure.
I think a starting place is, if that comes to that, is to go back to the last budget that I think was actually working was 2021 budget. Because I don't think the 2022 with that revenue is a fundable budget even, possibly.
And I've been saying, I think this is going to set us back 2 or 3 years, but I think we all have the reality of inflation too. So if we took away not only your increase, but we took away a bunch of the money you used last year, how are you going to get your work done?
Yeah, because I'm curious, if we just look at this year's budget and put today's revenues in it, is it even fundable?
It's why we're looking at what we have.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Now, we have mentioned that there's a couple things that the board could do. Because they're the ones that will or won't get service if we cut. But we can only stretch LETCF so far. And if we used it all up, we'd be in, I don't think we're going to get out of this in a year. I think we're going to have to it's going to take some time to get out of this. So I don't think we can throw 3 or 4 million of LETCF, but we could do some. We may or may not sell some property here soon that we've been trying. We could divert those funds in to, again, to help us, instead of us taking a $3 million drop and eliminating employees and all whatever, maybe taking small drops. I don't know. I'm just not sure how to figure this all out by the 29th. Much less the 5th. I was hoping for the 5th. So that's why we're having all of you in the room, because we're all elected. You all know your jobs better than I do. How are you going to do what you do? How are you going to get it done? How are you not going to lose people? How are we not going to demoralize? And I think we need to try and avoid the finger pointing thing as much as possible. And we do need to identify the problem so we don't repeat it. But how do we come together and get through? Peggy's, the only encouraging thing I heard so far from Peggy's biggest encouragement, I should say, was that it's not the first time we've been broke.
No, it's not.
It's survivable.
It is, and it can be done. There's not a doubt in my mind. It's gonna take some planning. And it's gonna be a lot of you guys working together on it. But this is not the first time that it's been this short. And there was 9 years, there was no raises, guys. and there was a reason for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that was catastrophic for the community.
Yeah.
Huh?
So if we come to, we have a deadline to meet and say we do have an outside audit and we discover an area that we, or whatever, if we discover something that can work within our budget, we can open the budget back up
Mhm.
at a later date and
Oh,
adjust.
absolutely. The commissioners have all sorts of options. You guys are not as, you can open up a budget at any time for, revenue at, that come in. So yeah, that's.
We just can't open it up and then increase
Yeah,
taxes.
you can't increase taxes.
No,
Right,
So
exactly.
we have to have it right at that time.
It's
Yeah.
revenue or using cash
Yep.
on opening up a budget.
Yep.
So that outside audit isn't gonna show you anything different from you today.
No, yeah.
We roll back that.
Yeah, I'm talking 21, when
Yeah.
the last budget that was actually probably funded, that
Roll back
worked.
to that. That would put us in a really good place. But then all of us are looking at potentially losing an employee.
Yes.
Lots of employees.
I think our employees would be willing to buck up and take it if all of us were treated equally. And then take some of that whatever,
Lettuce.
LETCF, issue some one-time bonuses. Tell those people you're appreciated. And 'cause biggest liability is our employee.
Yep.
But our biggest asset is our employees. And this is a kick in the gut, yeah. Uses some of that as a bonus. I understand, and in those years, paying when you look at
Well,
higher cost of living, every compounds it.
it compounds the people.
So, I don't think there's any smoking gun there. I think like, we've been using up our cash. I mean, this is where it's gotten us.
Living beyond our means.
And I think we had some foregone amounts that we were able
Right.
to use at that time. I'm taking it, we don't have.
Yeah, we can, but you're limited, and I'm
But you're
taking the
limited where I
53,000.
Mm.
That seemed
Oh,
to
that's
shake-
right, because they
I'm
started.
taking it.
them-
Yeah. see, I
She's
was
already
limited
included
at
the
time,
formula.
Way back when.
Pauline, I saw you nodding your head. We cannot use LETCF for,
You can. The, back to the Treasury's guidance on this is be very aware of what you're using it for, because you don't want to create burdens. It can be used for wages, it can be used for capital. Where's it gonna do your most benefit? So it's
Wages
kind
would
of
be
a,
going on and on though. That's the problem with wages. And the way I laid it out and the proposal that I make of the things that we do change is moving the capitals, moving the leases to LETCF. You move them out of the fund that they're in today and plan for them in LETCF. If they don't spend the money, which half of them don't spend it every year anyway, then it's not, you can unobligate it in LETCF later. But when it's put into a budget, you're stuck with it. So when people put in 25,000 for a capital expense year after year and they don't buy anything, what good is that doing?
It's just
It's raising your
obligated.
budget. It's bringing down possibly your capital because it's taking away money from everybody else when you do it. And it's been done for a long time. And you can look at every budget that goes back and you'll see those numbers, even in the ones that we have right now. The last 3 years, nothing spent in certain items. Why is that? There's one that should be in, and that's your general reserve that you can budget, $25,000-$50,000 in, and that it every year and not spend it is not okay, but that is a part of why we're where we are. And I outlined those on that paper I gave you yesterday or the day before on what all those things were.
So is the amount you can go up each year only 3% of the levied amount? So it's
3% of the total budgeted amount
Balance
for
to be-
every fund.
total amount to be levied? The hundred,
That's the total amount that can be levied.
Property value.
yeah, so roughly only $150,000 a year that it can go
About
up.
that.
Mhm.
Madam Treasurer, you haven't had a chance to speak and you're hiding back there. You have anything you wanted to add? Okay. Well, I'm gonna open it to 2-minute public comment. Everybody else is an employee but one, but Matt, would you like to make any public comment?
I talked about this for 3-4 years. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, I think that was a polite, I told you so. Okay. Do any of the staff? You have anything else you want to say at this point? I don't want to leave anybody out if anybody's sitting there with a bright idea.
Are we all in receipt of Tammy's recommendations for changes?
I have an updated copy of my phone.
Is it beneficial for us as a group to spend any time on that list while we're all here in the same room or no? It's something we should leave for another day.
Well,
Very
Mr. Chair, I'm asking the question, not
Do you think that would help? Go through that now?
We're on a time crunch. I don't see what it would hurt.
Yeah.
Everyone should like
All right.
to look at it.
Trying to decide if I have the updated one or not. Thank you. I can't tell if I did or not. You have that. Okay. Well, let's,
why we got there is the first page and a half.
what's 1 through 7.
And the next item is what we can do. And I've taken the liberty of planning for it. And where I would like if we are going to move forward with it. And then,
Thank you.
and Jerry. And that is how I would plan to move things around if we go with the suggestions that I have here. I did not go down to, the bottom where we do the COLAs. I didn't include any of that. So these are the actions that I see. The first 1 and 1A are moving funds from one fund to another. And, the reason it's a 1A on the one, is, oh wait, I don't think I put the right number in there. It's, moving from 207 or 107. And 107 is the, property infrastructure and improvement fund that we set aside money from sales of land and the potlatch land down the Joe and the Smelterville land out in Smelterville. That money was put into that fund so they could do improvements, sewer moves, electricity, anything else to make a property more sellable for a higher price. So there's $270,000 in that account. That could be moved into current expense with the resolution. And that one is, I guess that's down on number 8. 207,7535. The other one is the Maverick one, which we don't have yet. And if you want to overinflate revenue, you can put that in there and say, we're gonna get it, and where are we gonna put it when it gets here? It has to go into current expense. And then from there, you need to do, I guess. That's where it's supposed to come. The rest of these, the first one is moving 2 of my people from district court, which has a significant cash amount that could support having them come out of it, or having 2 more people coming in. They'd be coming in from court records, which is part of current expense, so it would save current expense $150,000. And move it to district court, which can fund it. And then all the rest of them are tracking the capital budgets to the LATCF fund, and that's every department that currently has a capital. The next one is every department that has a lease, moving all the leases over and paying them off. That neither one of those encumbers the county in any way for the future. They're paid off, they're done. Then you move down to 4 and 5. Those are both things that are part of our data processing budget, which is current expense 141. Part of that can come out of LATCF. It meets the rules. The other meets the rules of a grant that SHSP has through Office of Emergency Management. Those would also not hurt the county whatsoever. The transferring 5% of computer arts upgrade costs, over the next 3-4 years, we have 30% increase in our computer arts for this coming year. We have 25 the next year, 20 the next year, I think it is, and then 15, and then it goes down to 5. So my plan was to transfer 5, that we would pay 5% on the increase each year. And at the end of that period, we would still, LATCF would fund the rest of that increase, but when we got to the end, we would be only having to make up $4,000 in that 28 year. So it wouldn't encumber us a lot, but by that point, we should be able to find that much money. So that was another big one. And then removing VIBA from all departments, that's 130,000. So 1.177 million to that point. And then you can add in your Maverick and your
Where are we
other
on the
property
Maverick?
improvement.
We gave them a 30-day extension. They should close at the end of this next month.
In the October or
Yeah.
August,
I think in September.
September,
Yeah.
should close.
Yeah.
So how do we budget for that? Like technically, how do we budget for it? Do if we,
Anticipated revenue, just
and
like
then
we do for any other revenue we think we're gonna get in. And if you don't get it in, you got a shortfall, like we do right now.
yeah, I'm trying to figure out how not to make another mistake.
Put that in there?
Is that, okay, in the past, they put all of those sales, well, I only know about since I've been here, but they put it into that fund 107 property improvement. It was a 90. It's under the counter, something 92. Okay, where it came from, but it's one
Forego
of-
the sale
it's been in there
of
for a
purchase of
long
the
time.
property down
Hot
here.
watches before.
We're gonna use those funds for it.
Yep.
Because it-
Yeah, that would
be
put an
our
end to the
cash
jail
back.
property idea for
Take a
now.
look at.
That sure beats some of these other alternatives.
Agreed.
I think there's still room to cut in other budgets that I did not look at. It's not my purview to do that. Wouldn't do it now. Other than the
Do
capital.
some of these, include roads? What one is road
Roads is 2,
2?
yeah,
Cause
but why keep them in there and use roads funds if we can use LATCF and not have any lease to encumber the county in
Because-
any other way?
because paying off roads won't help
It won't help
current
us now,
expense at
no,
all.
it won't help us now, but if it ever got. in a
That'll just
situation-
take more money out of the LATCF. We could potentially
I agree.
pump into other areas.
Mhm. But if road crashes and you don't have a slush fund to help them out, where are you gonna get it? Cause it's not gonna be a gift like we have right now.
How
That's
much,
what I was looking at.
how much in LATCF money did you anticipate we'd be using?
I didn't separate that out.
Oh,
I mean, VIBA, I didn't even, I believe VIBA can be transferred to LATCF or not. I don't know that, so I didn't assume that it would be. I only assumed that the number 2, which is capital, the leases, the new equipment for data processing, the computer arts. Those are the only ones that I put over to LATCF, so 130,000 out of the 1.177. So $1,033,000.
And we have how much, Colleen? 4?
And LATCF is 3,940,000.
And,
Oh.
and do we have any of Slurpee left over?
Not uncommitted.
Not uncommitted. Do we have any we could uncommit? Okay, so that could be another,
They fit into the rules of that fund.
That one has more stringent rules on how it can be used.
yes,
LATCF is a little more lax.
just exploring all the options here. Because anything we can come up with is less of a burden on the employees and hence less of a detriment to us all getting our jobs done. And, I mean, we have to have manpower to accomplish the tasks.
So
So,
that's when people talk about fair and equal pay. Fair and equal are not the same, and equal pay among county workers. I think the job description should be the factor that decides the type of adjustment you'd make in the wage, not the fact that they're just a county worker. Because we have men and women out there doing super high risk jobs.
And to Holly's point, I mean, her department sees it as much as anyone. But when you're comparing the wages of certain employees within her department, most notably patrol officers, she's competing in a job market that has a set pool of individuals qualified to do the work. She's not advertising for a position that anyone can come on the street and perform. She's advertising for a job that realistically requires a post-certification. So there's a set pool of those individuals who are eligible to work that type of employment.
It's very small.
And her number one competitor, candidly speaking, is Kootenai County. And X number of individuals who are certified to work this job in the region. And she's not even remotely competitive. That's going to cause a huge issue for her wage-wise. So I think that's another factor. No, Polly didn't ask me to speak as a proponent of her department, but I'm bringing it up because I think that it goes to the point that when we're analyzing wages of various departments or employees or things like that, these are some of the factors that aren't readily apparent on paper, but they're the realities of what it takes to go out and hire and fill positions.
Would be applied to appraisers too, which is even.
The old step and grade system was done professionally and it took that all into account. That system was there placed, that took all that stuff into account. The problem is we will never be able to compare to Kootenai County.
I don't think it's a matter of comparing, like, I don't think it's a matter of trying to,
Keep the people, but that's,
what it is that you've got a 65% nationwide decrease in law enforcement applications. So county, and all we can do is we can provide a great work environment for them to come. We can provide them all the tools they need, and we just need to provide them a wage that they can actually live on. They're not asking to be paid like Kootenai County. They just want to be able to make a living, be able to, support their family, and they're okay with that. They could go over to Kootenai County right now as a lateral and make $32 an hour to start with a sign-on bonus, but they don't. We're looking at
I think a lot of those
some pretty bad times coming ahead for Shoshone County.
find out all apart.
Madam Clerk, I was trying to follow everything you said while I was reading along with this, but if we implemented everything you've suggested on here, how much of the burden did that absorb?
1.177, I think it's on page 2.
1.2, leaving us 2 million.
0.177858.
And so with that and the sale of the Maverick, we
Or, yeah, every elected official's budgets that could be cut.
And I think you're right. I think we're gonna have to do something there, but I just, for the record, we're still not talking about cutting. We're not doing that. We're trying to figure out everything else. The suggestion of maybe losing the VIBA, I think if we polled the employees, most of them would prefer that over a pay cut, but it's still another hit in the gut. Do you think we could use, Colleen? Yeah, that was my Colleen. You could tell my tone. She looked right up. Do you think we could use the LETCF for something like VIBA if we wanted to on a one-time thing?
You can.
Do you think we should? Thinking about the long-term implications.
I think if it's a one-time, and not meant as any kind of a long time, I think there's a case to be made for it. Because human capital is hard to come by, and so anything you can help to retain quality employees. And Aviva is a better option than a bonus. Because it has I mean, again, just in my scope of it, the Viva is a different than a bonus. All the bonuses are great. They're fabulous, but it's a higher expense that may not have the same impact. So yes, Viva, you could consider Viva and not if you needed to.
And it's not, I'm not proposing as chairman that we make any decisions today. I'm just proposing we gather information. But if we were to go through everything that the clerk has suggested, if we were to insert the sale of the Maverick property into the budget as expected revenue, and if we were to move the 270 out of that property infrastructure and improvement, just because I don't think that's as important as taking care of our personnel and meeting our obligations right now. It sounds like we might be able to get by for a year. How do we do it next year?
We won't need those next year because everything that we're taking out is a one-time expense.
Good
It's
point.
also a one-time revenue.
Good. One-time revenue.
I feel very strongly that we're not gonna spend all that money. I feel very strongly that we're probably maybe gonna be able to find a lot more money in our individual budgets that can offset this. I mean, look really hard. If you haven't spent any in 3 years, why is it in there? It's asked every year when I have budget meetings with every department head. And every year it's, we're gonna get it this year. We're gonna spend it this year. We got plans for that this year. Every year it doesn't get spent. So my thought is, get rid of it.
And that includes
You can add it back in next year.
raising taxes 3% as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way you can get away from that. And if you do, Jeff, every time, if you were to lower it, say to 2%, we only took our 2%, not 3%. Next year, you're gonna go up from what the 2% was, not what the 3% would have been. So you're going backwards every single year. So you're never gonna make up these deficits that we have.
Yeah, I
But
can speak to Tammy's point. I mean, if you sit in and, one administrative IAC meeting and talk to,
I've heard AIC and I've heard the 3%.
you talk to some wisdom, the counties that typically get themselves in trouble long-term are the ones that decide to cut for a year or two, and they run into a inflation hike like we saw recently, and they just can't dig back out of that hole.
Inflation is the unpredictable monster in the
And
room.
I know there's a commissioner, out there that's gonna present a bill, to go forward in September to actually raise the 3% cap.
Yeah,
It
because it
probably
hasn't
won't
been
go
enough
through
to
the way
keep
it's
up with
written today,
inflation.
But afterwards, after they tweak it down to where they think it will maybe go through, maybe it'll raise to 4 or 5 or something, because at 7.8% inflation, there's no way we will ever keep up.
Right. That's a reality that we're stuck with. Let's talk about message to our folks and that. How do we encourage our people through this and how do we minimize the impact on the employees? Because that is my concern. If we destroy our departments that we've been working to build up, then we're just going to spend more money recruiting and training other people. And so how do we minimize this for the average employee? We're looking at no cost of living increase.
I'll speak first on behalf of my department. I know where my employees sit. I know where my office sits infrastructure wise, and I know what's in the proposed budget, top to bottom of what I submitted. And candidly, if we've got to cut somewhere in our budget, I would rather sit back down with my budget, analyze some of the capital or infrastructure components of it that maybe I can defer down the line and sacrifice that in exchange for my employees' well-being. And that's my budget. I'm not speaking for any of the other elected officials, but I know where my current employees are sitting compared just to the other counties of the first district, just to our immediate neighbors. So I'm not comparing an analysis of, hey, let's look at our county to counties of a similar caseload. I'm just saying the counties around us, our immediate job market. I just got off a conference call today with the other elected prosecutors of North Idaho, and Boundary County approved a 5% increase for their salaried employees. So I'm using salaried because my prosecutors are all salaried. So Boundary approved a 5% increase. Bonner approved a 3% increase. Kootenai approved a 4% increase, but also restructured their entire pay step to result in significant increases beyond that for their attorneys. And so I can't go back to my prosecuting budget and say, what else can I sacrifice so I don't lose employees? Because the market's not there. I've been advertising for a vacant prosecutor position for over a half a year now.
And the business about Kootenai County and us, this is simple. Let's say, we have 14,000 people. Kootenai has 181,000. So let's knock the 1,000 off. We got 14 taxpayers, and we have 181 taxpayers. You have a $14,000 bill. 14 taxpayers are going to come up with $1,000 a piece. If you have a 14,000 bill with 181 taxpayers, that's $77 a piece. So that shows you that our tax base, is nowhere near. So that's what we have to look at our taxpayers as well when we're factoring that out. I know that, we can't keep up with Kootenai County. Kootenai County can't keep up with Spokane. Spokane can't keep up with Seattle. Seattle's keeping up. There's countries or small communities all across the nation, and that's what the problem is where's the fine line at? And it's hard. That's the hard deal. And then we look at our taxpayers. We got older people that are not able to pay their taxes because they're going up. So we've got to really kind of all keep that in mind too.
And it doesn't help when there's been a shift back on the residential properties.
Exactly.
From your commercial, your timber, your mining stuff, as those people see their tax liability deep. Help coming for those people. What that is, nobody knows.
Yeah, they'll tell them.
But, when you look at the big box stores are coordinating your Walmarts, your Targets.
Yeah.
Resort. I think there's 3 Walmarts there, or one and only box store. Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
So all that tax base, and 73% of Kootenai County is federally exempt.
Exactly.
With state coming in and buying up more timber ground that we receive revenues on, and now we don't. Doesn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Prosecutor, just to follow up on what you were saying, are you saying you would rather go back and find other things to cut and protect your 1% COLA, or are you just and protect your folks where they are? I mean, what was your final point there?
Obviously, the COLA is an across the board determination that the county can set for employees. I defer to the DOCC in making that decision based on the input you get from the various departments. I mean, that's a group decision when it comes to the COLA.
What do you think happens if we have to freeze pay where it is?
I can tell you, at least for my salaried employees, it'll be catastrophic. I mean, I don't have shared in this room. I know that people in this room are well aware. But if I just went back this week, what's today, Thursday? Monday night, I was at the office till 10 o'clock at night. Tuesday, I made it home by about 7. Last night, I was still working till past 9 o'clock. And I start working every day at 5 a.m. So, I mean, at some point, you got to have the help to keep up with the workload. And I get there's a lot of factors coming into play. So don't let this be the end all be all. I'm just giving an example that if I'm trying to bring employees on board, they're going to say, hey, what's everyone else around me in my career field doing? And if they're being worked harder and paid less, they're just going to go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And when you're dealing in a career field that my office has to operate in, where I have to require a doctorate degree of somebody just to sit at the desk, the workforce is very limited. And so, I mean, that's the dilemma that I'm up against. And I try to get really creative in my office about finding other ways to attract or incentivize people to choose Shoshone County. And you know, there's a lot of arrows in my quiver that I try to rely on in that regard to say, how can I get creative about making this job incentivizing? And some of them work very well, but at the bottom line, I also have to have the pay for their salaried position, or it's really a non-starter. Once I get somebody in the door, can I do everything possible to retain them, to keep them, to create the work environment that's conducive, teach them other areas of the law to make them more knowledgeable as an attorney? Sure, I can do all that. But if I don't even have the incentive to get them in the door, it puts my office at a real detriment. So,
Ben, I agree with you 100%. That's compounded there, just some degree. So I don't understand. That's hard to explain that my employees are doing the exact same job with many more years experience than someone doing the same job, why they're being paid less. That it's I think he meant sitting me. Mm-hmm. So that's, every department's got that to some degree, somewhere in another. So, you know, I see what outside wage study should have came in and looked at air.
Yeah, I think Peggy made a point like that earlier too. All right, folks. We've been at it for a while. You're all aware of the problem. And I don't, you know, we don't have hard answers, but we have a general idea where the problem's coming from. And it sounds like consensus in the room is that we're going to have to come up with cuts. I don't know how we're going to get any other answers. I'm still looking for my miracle in case I can find one that says, oh yeah, you know, you missed a zero here. We're fine. Mm-hmm. But barring that, I think we're going to need to ask all the elected, I'm speaking for myself, commission, that to go back and do the hard look and make some choices of your own on what your priorities are in your own budgets. I would like to see if we can do this without without impacting the employees any more than necessary. And maybe we can come up with some, maybe it's possible if we do the math in my head here that we could do this without. I think we can do this without cutting pay. Would you think that's true?
I do if everybody
Would,
really needs it, goes and do.
okay, that would be my first goal. I know that's still a punch in the stomach for folks that, oh, I didn't get a raise and I'm more experienced and I'm more, and the economy's killing me. But it sure would be to cut. We didn't make this problem. We're just inheriting it. So now we've got to turn it around.
Fix it.
Could we ask, commission, could we ask the elected if you would all please, and some of you, this is going to be really hard because you're thinking you've already done this, but go back and look for, and just now we're down to making priorities. Is there anything in your budget, like Tammy mentioned, that you haven't spent that we could take out with the idea that if, some of that, if it came up like in my head, I'm already ready to commit to removing all the capital budget items.
Copy of your budget, current budget.
If you can send me the most recently updated copy of mine with the adjusted numbers. Does the BOCC have a deadline that they'd like updated proposals from the various departments by?
Well, Tammy, you're saying, I believe I heard you say we need this by Tuesday.
Sooner the better. It's gonna take some time to get through all of them, so.
Does the BOCC, do we want to schedule another budget workshop for Monday or Tuesday?
Probably Monday,
Monday would probably
Monday
be
and
really good.
Tuesday. Yeah.
Okay,
There you go, Ben.
could you?
Yeah.
So we understand what your thinking is, and then, of course, come to that workshop. If again,
Monday give you as a commission enough time to actually receive those, review them, and then have input by a Monday meeting if you're not getting them until Monday?
my thought was to have folks to help explain their proposals Monday, and then we set another meeting for Tuesday to start to take action.
Okay.
But if I sit and read it and then I email you with my questions, it might be faster if we had a meeting and I scan, especially if you could put them in outline form or something and we could just walk through them together. I want to thank everybody in the room for your participation. This has just been a wonderful meeting to chair. Okay. Thank you, Peggy, for helping. Thank you, Tammy, for putting up with it. All of us.
Oh, I thought you meant me.
No, no, I didn't, but that's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tammy, for putting up with her. Anything else from the commission?
No,
All right, we are adjourned.
thank you.